once we're live.
We are live, David. What's your question for me?
Okay, Tom, here's my question. You
Okay.
saw the Monster Manual preview this morning,
Yes. Yes.
and it excited you enough to immediately decide to schedule a D&D game,
Yeah.
which will ironically be before the Monster
Monster Manual
Manual
comes out, right?
appears, so you will not be able to torment us with those new monsters.
Right.
Can you explain this to me?
I don't know that I can, except for all the hype. We'll look at some of the images and stuff from the Monster Manual. It looked really cool. I like the monster design they got going. We'll look at some of the monsters that have been previewed so far. There's only been a couple, only a handful. Um, they made players more powerful with all these different things that monsters have to save against now.
Yeah.
But it looks like they're adding a legendary resistance to more monsters, probably as a compensation, I imagine. We'll see how that goes. We got some people streaming in. If you're joining us, leave a note in the chat. Let us know who you are. We're going to take a look at monsters, stat blocks, encounters, and TTRPGs. We're going to look at the Monster Manual preview. And let me just share my screen here. This is what I got coming up, and David's involved in some of this too. In Search of the Unknown. So I'm working on my new RPG, the d20play RPG, which you've played one time, David.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be running In Search of the Unknown this weekend. Excited about that. That was the first adventure I ever ran. What was the very
nice.
first adventure you ever ran, David?
What would be the first? Well, it would have to have been, something of my own creation if it were not the tiny scrap of an adventure in the basic handbook from 77. Otherwise, it
Is
would have
that
been
the one
something I
that's got
made.
like the skull in cross section?
The Xenopus Tower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Cool. And there are several cool maps for this one. Hey, Nicholas, thanks for joining us. Question for the chat here. Anyone in chat, what was the first adventure you ever ran? Let us know. So yeah, In Search of the Unknown, I went looking for maps, and John Pintar's got maps. And he's got a bunch of old school maps, B1, B2, I think. The whole Slaver series, the whole Giant series, the whole Drow series, Queen of the Demon Web Pips, even got the cool spider ship in that one.
Wow.
Reminiscent
Awesome.
of, the Wild West or whatever it was movie.
Right.
Yeah. And so I got that map. And then another Dyson Logos made a map. I'm sure this one here. Spoilers if you're going to be running the adventure. But he took and he kind of like reimagined the adventure. So he's got it in 3 different layers and kind of rejiggered, rooms moved around and such, and it makes a little bit more sense the way he did it. I think I'm going to go with the John Pintar map just because color and I want to support John. But Dyson maps are cool too if you guys are running anything like that. So that's what I got coming up. Anything coming up for you, David? You're going to be playing in one of my games. You got kids running Rolemaster?
Okay, this just blows my mind.
Yeah.
My 20-year-old daughter has somehow entirely on her own decided that she was interested in Rolemaster based on a YouTube video that she watched, and the guy was touting Rolemaster.
Yeah.
Now, to me, and I think to everybody of my generation, it's hard to imagine. No slight on Rolemaster, but it's hard to imagine that somebody would come to it without a big glow of nostalgia for this game.
Yeah.
And somehow this happened completely independent of me. And she ran a one-shot for Rolemaster for her friends. She says that she likes the tactical nature of the combat, the way that it does not assume that like D&D does so much. It doesn't presume that characters are just naturally going to succeed almost all the time. And third, here's no surprise to anybody. Every time she read off the result of a crit or a fumble at the table, everyone burst out laughing. So 3 big assets for Rolemaster, and what is it, Generation Z there.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm a big believer that players like Carnage a lot more than modern game designers give him credit for. I think the training wheels are on with current games, and we need to take them off. And I think players will like it. I mean, there's a limit to that. You can't be just
yes.
killing every character, every adventure, and then there's no point going on. But players like a little bit of Carnage, I think. They like the challenge. You got to give some challenge. Otherwise, what's the point? It's like story hour at grandma's house or whatever. Some people might like that. Not my cup of tea. So yeah, that's really cool. Jumping into Rolemaster. I think my first Rolemaster was because it was Middle Earth. I think I found one of their Middle Earth modules, got it, and then started getting the Rolemaster rules that went with it. Nicholas says the first adventure he ever ran was Sunless Citadel. That was a good adventure. That was a good 3rd edition. Was it 3rd or 3.5 when Citadel came out? I think it was 3rd.
It was the introductory 3rd edition adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sunless Citadel may rate as my very favorite introductory adventure for D&D, full stop. The only asterisk is it's a total dungeon crawl. So if you want to give players sort of a sampling of other things, then maybe something like Lost Mine of Phandelver is a better option. But as a dungeon crawl for first level characters, Sunless Citadel just end-to-end great. It's got role-playing encounters, factions, twig blights.
Yep.
NPCs to make friends with, and the classic the Meepo, the kobold.
Yeah.
It's creepy. It's got a certain dimensionality with the citadel sunk beneath the ground. That adventure is just I can go on and on about how great that adventure is.
It's really good. Really good. Check out the channel. Search for Sunless Citadel. We played it. I got the videos of us playing it. It's old, so I'm sure the quality of everything is pretty poor the way I used to run it, but Nicholas says my party very much believed in Meepo supremacy. Yeah. I've had my players had Meepo for half the campaign, I think, as an undead zombie follower for most of it. But that was Sunless Citadel. That was a fun one. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the monster manual art. And Ian World kindly put together a collection here. So check out Ian World. I'm going to zoom in on these guys. Faceless Stalker. Is that a doppelganger, you think? Is there a monster called a Faceless Stalker?
Could it be a leveled down version of an invisible stalker?
Maybe.
Like a killer construct?
Yeah. Maybe. Then next we have a demon of some kind. I think I know what it is. What do you think this one is, David?
Chat.
What do you guys think this is in the chat?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
First one to get it right. First one to confirm what I think. You don't win anything except for glory. So type it in the chat. I'll come back to that one after someone types into the chat what they think that one is. Now, what kind of threw me, my mother-in-law, what kind of threw me was all the eyes. So it might be some variant of what I think it is. Yeah, Barlgura. That's what I think it is.
Oh,
Barlgura, but maybe Veloth or something.
It's not very ape-like.
It's got the orangutan, though, head.
Okay.
And, it's got the orangutan color fur. In-World has Legends in the Mist as most anticipated RPG of 2025. Definitely agree. What, Greg, is Legends in the Mist? That's not Cosmere, right? I don't think it is. But yeah, let us know what that one is. Okay, so there is the Balgura, I think. Got your Arch Hags.
Wind back to that just for a moment. One of the things they were touting in the video is that some of these monsters that have traditionally had a specific gender, hags being female, they're moving away from that. So you've got the male hags, and I, for one, who have seen so many parties look askance at any lone older woman out in the countryside, or heaven forbid, 3 together.
Older women in the countryside.
And attacking on sight. I'm happy that we
Yeah.
can mix that up a little bit and send some surprises towards the players.
Their picture of that old man hag was creepy AF. I mean, I think of a lot of horror movies of some really creepy old men. That's gonna be interesting. Yeah, I don't know why it's been verboten to have the opposite sex of a lot of these creatures for so long. It's just more mystery for the players to try and figure out. So I think that's a good thing. Definitely. Okay, so that's hags. Then we got some kobolds, some kind of kobolds. Now Feshni, perhaps. Yeah, looks like it could be. I don't know what else that might be besides an Alfeshni. Revenant, Blue Dracolich, Death Knight, and they talked about the Death Knight having a lot of different new types of followers. I remember the Shadow of the Dragon Queen had some pretty cool Death Knight-like enemies in it, and so that'll be good.
Yeah.
That went along with Soth. Death Tyrant, Chimera. Now, one thing they hyped up that actually is kind of a detriment for me, I don't know what other people think of it, is how all the pictures are them in action. Yeah, that's cool. But now how do I make tokens? It used to be so easy to get a token because everything was a PNG on a white background, and they easily cut out a cool token.
You're just going to have to fall back on 50 years of earlier D&D art there, Tom.
Yeah, I will be able to do that at least. Nick said they went hard into the heavy metal vibe for the devils and demons. Yeah, I wonder if they'll have a picture of a bone devil in here. If not, I'll try and find one because that one's really, really bad, evil looking. Thought there was minion mechanic. Now, I did hear something about minion mechanics. So it'd be interesting to see that. I'm leery that they didn't playtest, at least not publicly, the monster manual at all. So they didn't playtest publicly minions at all. And I know that, you can get that kind of stuff wrong, and then it really, lasts for 10 years in your system. I hope they did.
Yeah. I bet you there isn't one because I think it would have appeared in the
They talked about
DMG.
goblin minions. They did. I mean, goblins have 7 hit points, right? So a minion version might have 2 or whatever, but that's not like a minion.
It not something that has its own corner of the rules that work for it specifically, like you see in Flea Mortals, where they've got a couple of pages devoted to specific minion rules.
Yeah. Get Yankees, Mummy Lord, Marrow. Good picture of a Marrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. A Balrog / Baylor. They did go a lot more, Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings on the look of this thing. That's interesting. All the different kinds of mimics. Yeah, it's probably the new Sphinx, right? Here it is, the Bone Fiend. Yeah, so Bone Devil, I mean, looks much more threatening, much more diabolic, much more evil. I like that one for sure. Slod. Some of this artwork I really like. Some it's meh. But that's how every book is,
Sure.
for every person. Has he got a monkey on his head? What is going on over here? Does the green Slod have a monkey on his head riding?
I believe that is just supposed to be in the distant background.
Oh, you think so?
Yes, but like one of those poorly framed photos where it seems like somebody's got a tree growing out of their scalp. I think that's
you're right. That is like
maybe
just on the top of his head.
Yeah.
Maybe. But they are wizards, right? So maybe that's his familiar.
Okay. Go with that.
I'm going with that. That's my explanation. Rust Monster. Blue something. I don't know how he got off to the different type of screen. Maybe if I X this, go right back. Yeah, there we go. Rust Monster, Platinum Dragon. Not sure what that one is.
Yeah.
Bronze Dragon. Hezru, I think you're right there. Hezru. I think it's Christian Hoffer who pulled all these together. Hezru Demon, although it's got some weird stuff going on here with these different mouths on its back.
they look, from based on just this little bit of art, they're really steering in the chaos of the demons here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. You know who really goes crazy with demons is the MCDM, right? Their demons are like completely different looking,
Yeah.
and just chaotic. So there's that. Fire Giant, not Karlach. Is Karlach a Baldur's Gate 3 character? I gotta play Baldur's Gate 3. I think it is. Cloud Giants. I like the little fangs, harkening all the way back to the original Monster Manual, which was a copy of some artwork that came before. I forget what it was. Zombies, even an audio zombie, maybe the ogre zombie, lizard man zombie,
Yeah.
red dragon. And here's the creepy old man hag.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to run into that guy. Male dryad, horn devil. So yeah, they're going real metal on the devils. You're right. Who said that? Was that Nick who said that? Oh, got a lot of chats here. Let's get back to this. Balgra. They went hard. Yeah, that was Nick. I thought there was Minion. Yep, talked about that. Greetings, Agile Monk. Thanks for joining. How is that not in DMG? I missed that. Sorry, Greg. I don't know what you're talking about. Wish these
Probably
artists...
Minions.
Oh, I bet you're right. Wish these artists did Player's Handbook. Yeah, they do seem different completely. It's so pinch and cookies. Yes, Karlach is Baldur's Gate 3. Thanks, Tiger. Okay. We got a couple more pictures here to look at. Incubus and Succubus. Vampires. They talked about a lot of different levels of vampires because, yeah, vampires are a favorite enemy, but they're like CR14 for a full-on vampire. Okay, here's one. Chat, take a guess on what this guy is. I think I know. I think I know what that guy is. What do you think it is, David?
One of the Loths.
Yeah, Damon.
Yugoloth?
I don't think it's a Yugoloth.
No, Nikoloth. That's what it is, I believe.
Possibly. I was thinking Mesoloth, but you might be right about Nikoloth.
Oh, yeah, that might be.
Well, you might be right about Nikoloth because they had the big, I don't think it's Spine Devil, because they had the big huge axe, the great axe. The Nikoloths usually had that.
Yeah, and the Mesoloths have like pinchers, but they're more insectile.
Insectoid on the head. I think you're right. I think that is a Nikoloth. And they specifically talked about that in the live stream, so I bet that's what that was. Vampire, Colossus, talking about a lot of high CR creatures. Spirit Naga, Copper Dragon, White Dragon. Wonder if that's a throwback to Rime of the Frostmaiden and that ship where you meet the White Dragon. Blue Dragon doesn't look very blue in this. Looks silverish.
But that looks very silverish.
Yeah. Even the head looks silverish.
I would
Gold Dragon.
Say silver.
Black Dragon. This guy's jumping through. Anyone know what this adventure might be? It looks like automatons and stuff and gears and such. And he's going through some sort of portal to get into it. Not sure if that's a reference to something. That's it. Was this Christian Hoffer? Yeah, Christian Hoffer. Thanks, Christian. Go check out Ian World, everyone. A lot of cool pictures Christian gathered together there. And then there's an article, what's new in the 2024 Monster Manual. And kind of, they talk about covering habitat and treasure and gear on creatures. Legendary monsters for higher level play, including CR22 Elementals, CR21 Archhag. I think Dungeon Dudes did a video on like the Animal Lords or Nature Lords, or I think Animal Lords. Revamped NPC stat blocks. They talked about how the stat blocks will have like various levels of power, like not just the mage who's CR5 or whatever, but multiple different levels of mages. So that's good. Variations of iconic monsters and monsters, quote, easier to find. If you're brand new, maybe to D&D, but it might be harder to find if you're experienced with D&D because you'll look at the wrong spot first. All right, so that was that. So let's start looking at some of the stat blocks and just look at what we think of these. Nick said, could that be Gate Town that connects to Mechanus for the Black Dragon? Maybe. Okay, so we got the Imperium, and this was on, Cody's channel, D4 Deep Dive or D4 something. Sorry, Cody. But you have the 2024 Imperium on the left, 2014 Imperium on the right, and looking at the damage they do on output of damage, the thing didn't used to have multi-attack. I'm looking at a stat block on the right. There's no multi-attack. Now it's got 2 attacks. The attack damage is the same for the sacred weapon as it was before, but now it's doubled because it gets 2 of them. And they have an interesting mechanic there. The target has the stun condition, no save, until the start of the Imperium's next turn. They can choose not to be stunned and take 21 force damage. That bypasses resistance or immunity. Wonder why they had to label it force damage if it bypasses. Maybe if you have vulnerability to it.
I think force damage is their new almost untyped damage. You'll notice that where it's used to say its weapon attacks are magical, now its weapon attacks do force damage. It's almost the untyped, most things can't resist damage in this new iteration of the game.
And the Death Ray did more damage and twice. So that's real potent. Damage types changed. They have a lot less to pick from, but still pretty potent. A few less spells to cast. Their legendary actions. Jeremy talked about how they tried to make whatever legendary action you picked kind of like the same potency. So you couldn't make a mistake and pick something that made them much weaker than before. So that's good if they did that. I mean, they could use to take an attack, and they still can with the Divine Ray. But then they have these other pretty cool legendary attacks they can do.
Yeah, and Shockwave of Glory, the equivalent, used to be 2 legendaries, and now it's 1, but you can only use it once per round. So
that's good. I hope they got rid of all those, cost 2 legendaries things. That'd be a good thing to get rid of, and hopefully we'll see that on all the monsters.
I think we can also call out that after all this indecision over whether they're going to replace legendary actions with a bigger range of reactions, that I think we saw with one of the dragons that's going to be in the monster manual. Now we're seeing legendary actions. They don't seem to have picked a lane. I'd be very interested in knowing the design reason why they go one way with a certain monster and another way with a different monster, or if it's just sort of they parceled out the monster design chores, and some of the designers liked doing it with the reactions and some of them like doing it with the legendary actions, and they never really agreed on one particular approach.
Yeah, we'll look at one in a minute, but we don't know. Maybe it changed since the preview. Maybe they've gone full legendary. We'll see. Nick says, I do enjoy that Imperiums can also be fiends. Yeah, Celestial or Fiend, Titan. That's really good because there was, you think of, was it Kronos who became Saturn, and he would eat his children? So yeah, it's good that they can be fiends. Then, okay, so that's a CR23 creature doing a lot more damage. That's good. And they did say they were keeping all the CRs the same. So then let's look at this one. But this was kind of an early preview. And this one's like you're saying, David, where it has reactions. So we'll see if it kept the reactions or not. And this is the adult or ancient green dragon. Very similar hit points to before. Everything's very similar to before, but the damage is increased. Instead of doing the bite, claw, they have rend just multiple times. And their breath weapon's still, I think, pitiful. I think an ancient green dragon should do a lot of damage with its breath weapon, like 120 points of damage on average. Now they did get rid of Hero's Feast, giving you immunity to poison. I think I have to go
Yeah,
double
it's
check Hero's Feast.
resistance now, I
I
believe.
think it's resistance, but a lot of things have resistance to poison. So a lot of parties are going to be able to take that breath weapon and just kind of laugh at it.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be laughing at an ancient green dragon. So I will for sure increase the amount of damage those do when I run them. And they can charm at will, charm monster level 5. So that's going to be dangerous to be around a green dragon. So then let's look at the Koatoa. They talked about how they have these little features, these little feature like blurbs. That's an example of one here for the Koatoa. This is their deity. And their stat blocks, and we'll talk about this in the various different stat blocks we look at here in a minute. It's a lot to look at, right? For a CR 1/4 monster. You know, do you need to?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you need it to be this wordy? So we'll look at that. Some other systems, Shadow Dark, hint, will be one we look at, which is much more to the point. Then here's the skeletons, and the flaming skeleton made a return to your desire, David.
Love it.
Yeah, that one's a fun one because it blows up, I think, right? Anything that blows up is fun for the DM.
Yes.
Death Burst, yeah, Death Burst. It's a pretty simple stat block. All these are pretty good. Pretty simple. So let's look at several different systems and their stat blocks. Look at first the current vampire. So here's a creature with 144 hit points, CR 13, just a wall attacks for the DM. You know, how's the DM going to pick out of here and do the right thing for this creature? It just goes on and on and on. And what things should happen when you're running this creature? Well, it should drink the party's blood. That's one iconic vampire thing. And maybe shapeshift, another iconic vampire thing, and charm, another iconic vampire thing. And it's all in here, but it can be hard. It's hard to actually do the bite for damage because you first got to grab them. And then when you grab them, you got to decide, I don't want to damage them. I just want to grab them. And then I can bite them. And so it's like to get to their core thing, you have to go down a little bit. And let's look at Shadow Dark and how it just gets right to the point. So we got vampire, 3 bite attacks, damage, and drain blood. So that vampire is going to drink your blood.
Yeah.
I think it's overkill having 3 bites that drink blood. And I have an idea how I would change that. Or 1 charm. And I'd give it both. Let it charm and bite. Because if it's just charming, it's going to die. You're charming one character of a party and the other 4 are beating you to a fault. You're not going anywhere. The charm is useful if you have isolated someone, for sure. But, the party wouldn't get to see that if they were actually facing it in combat. So my idea for that, this stat block here, vampire, would be basically they have 3 actions in Shadow Dark. So Shadow Dark, 3 bites. So in this one, I just change it to be 3 actions, and I make charm one of them. I make bite one of them, and you can do it as many times as you need to until you hit 1 time. And then you go on to rending them. So that way you get the bite in that drains blood, but you don't drain blood 3 times. That's my idea there for the vampire. But I really like when the DM can get the tools, and these monsters are going to be on the scene for 3 to 5 rounds. The DM can get their signature thing done. So I do like that. What are your thoughts on that? And then we're going to look at MCDM, David.
Yeah, I think it's vital that the monsters be able to show something characteristic of the monster, and that DMs have some sort of guidance on what perhaps to do it. I think they were mentioning some tactics in the 2024 DMG. One of the things in Shadow Dark is you don't get a lot of non-combat stuff for these creatures, do you?
You don't. No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, you got Charm, right? And that's really the vampire's non-combat thing. You got Shape Change. That's another non-combat thing where the vampire's going to be sneaking around and shape-changing. So then let's look at MCDM's vampire. This is the latest Patreon packet. MCDM is very much like 4th edition. And here's the interesting thing I find with all the editions I played 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, Shadow Dark now, MCDM, Daggerheart. The systems that slow down are the ones that don't challenge the players hard enough, fast enough, I think. 4th edition suffered from this, where the creatures would attack the players and not really do real damage to them, but the creatures would have a lot of hit points. So the battle would go on and on and on, and the players would never feel threatened.
Yeah.
And I think you really got to, once you judge your party's capabilities, you got to ramp the damage up. You don't want to ramp the hit points up. It's okay if they die in 3 to 5 rounds, just they should output a lot of damage on the party. And so I don't know if MCDM pulls this off yet or not, because that's certainly a trap it could fall into if it doesn't have the monsters dish out enough damage fast enough. But that's an easy fix. We'll talk about that in a second too. With any system, it's easy for the DM to ramp up the damage. Okay, so Vampire Lord, they have, like 4th edition had the regular vampire, leader vampire, which has like they have more actions. Solos have more actions than MCDM. I don't know if leaders have more actions or not. But in MCDM, you get an action. So let's look at a regular vampire. Exsanguinating Bite. They're going to do damage. They're going to cause you to bleed. They're going to regain stamina. So they're going to bite and drink your blood. Unlike the 5th edition vampire that has to grapple you first, not do damage when it grapples you, and then drain your blood. This guy's just going right for the action. Vicious Pursuit. And this uses some malice. So this system, kind of like Daggerheart, has a pool, and I think Tales of the Valiant does this too, has a pool of a resource for the DM to spend, which I'm not a super big fan of. As a DM, I already got enough stuff to think about. I don't need to be worrying about a pool of numbers to track, but I haven't played it, so I don't know for sure if this would be very painful to run. If the target's bleeding, and they can get bleeding from up here, the vampire may shift up to their speed before rolling this power. Vicious Pursuits in action. So basically, you just it sucks your blood and then it stays on you and slows you down after that. And then it's got a triggered reaction where it can charm. So there it can get its charm in. Creature makes a strike against it. Boom! It charms them.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. It's not really a real charm. The target becomes the new target of the strike.
Oh.
Targets one enemy. Yeah. And then Unslakable Bloodthirst, the vampire speed of 10, while the creature is bleeding within 10. Oh, that's cool. You see that a lot in vampire movies where they're like really fast and they're on you before you realize they're on you. That's a cool thing.
In other words, backing up to the charm, in other words, you're charming someone to jump in and take the blow for you.
Yep. Yeah, basically someone within 5 of you is going to jump in front of the attack and take it for you, which is good. I mean, that's what the vampires would do with their charmed people, right?
I like it.
Yeah. And, they have the leader type, and then they go all the way up to, a full-on solo, level 10, which is the highest level in the game. Count Rodar von Glauer, and just, 2 whole columns of stuff this guy can do. And he's a solo, so he's getting 2 actions per turn, or 2 turns per round, and then multiple actions on their turn. And they have these cool villain action things that they do where, and I like how they did this. Instead of the legendary actions, they have villain actions where they just say, okay, you do this one first, and then you do this one, then you do this one. So you're not choosing what you're doing. Red Tide, an 8 cube within 15. All enemies in the cube are going to take corruption damage and become blood soaked. And Rodari has basically double advantage on allies or abilities against the blood soaked creatures. And then he ramps it up to Sanguine Mist in a 5 burst, so 5 squares every direction from him. Each target makes a test, or they're going to take a lot of damage and keep bleeding until the encounter ends if they fail that one badly. And the count teleports to a vacant space within the affected area. And then finally, Fires of Dracul, which does a whole bunch of damage and weakens creatures. So it looks like a lot of stuff, but this stuff you just kind of do in order. So that's not like you got to pick from it. You just do the first one on the first action, I think.
Yeah.
And the second one in the second round. So that's all free, basically, stuff to do. This is just re-explaining how solo works, which is going to be the same all the time. And I kind of like how they do their, instead of having legendary resistances, like 5e does, they have where they can take damage to end the effect on them, which I think would feel a lot better for a player who just cast a power word, or not a power word, but some spell that's, hold monster or something like that. And then you just say, doesn't affect me, even though I rolled a 1 on save. Instead, it'd be like, oh, I failed the save, but I'm going to take 20 damage. So you did something to him at least.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And
I wonder if we'll have to ask James when we have him as a guest again. I wonder if there's a design target in Draw Steel for how long a typical combat is expected to last.
Yeah, we're gonna have James on, by the way, in 3 weeks. He's coming on. What's the date? He's coming on the 28th. So if you have any questions for James and Tricasso, the designer for Draw Steel, get them in. I want to try and run something so I at least have a little bit of familiarity with the final version of the system. I ran playtest packet 1, 2, and 3, but I haven't run 4 yet. So I haven't run anything really high level yet either. I got to try that. So yeah, go to my Discord, and you just put a comment. I'll put the Discord at the first comment of the video here, so you can jump on the Discord, leave questions for James about this stuff. Okay, then Tiger has a question. Where's the weakness against sunlight and garlic? That's a really good question. Let's look at a D&D vampire. So they have down here vampire weaknesses, all the good legendary vampire weaknesses that you have. Shadow Dark. They have take 3d8 damage each round while in direct sunlight. So they're just sunlight, not garlic and all the other things. So definitely, Shadow Dark's a lot more shorter in their stat blocks. They get the critical things, but not the whole broad scope of everything you could have. MCDM. Grave Ward. He has damage immunity 5, which holy damage drops. Yeah, I don't see a whole lot of light effect in this guy. Let's see if light affects a regular vampire in MCDM. Vampire. Level 7. Immunity. If anyone knows, leave it in the chat. But yeah, good point. Maybe it's under like general vampire weaknesses somewhere. Vampires and Vampire Lords. Haunt, Waxen, Undead Malice. Good point. Yeah, I don't see anything about that in MCDM. Okay. That is about all I got for stat blocks. Any other questions on stat blocks before we go to encounters? Okay, let's talk about encounters. So encounters is something a lot of people like to kind of make fun of. It's easy to make fun of because the reason I think it's so easy to make fun of is you can never do it right because parties are always different strength levels. So you can give a challenge, easy, medium, hard, and it's only going to be easy, medium, hard for the type of party you assumed it's going to be easy, medium, and hard for. And what did they assume? What did the designers assume? I think they probably assumed a pretty easy party are pretty inexperienced group of players, so that they're not all dying in the published adventures, which then makes the published adventures seem kind of trivial once you got some experience. So the DMs need to know, and the system should do a better job of this, to ramp stuff up. Once your characters get experience, your players get experience, and if they have good synergies and they're playing a good, spectrum of characters that cover all the bases, like the paladin with the aura, the healer, the leader, and they can really dish out some damage, then you got to start ramping stuff up to challenge them. And so I think it was Sly Flourish had a good system that he came up with on his website. He also put it into Forge of Foes, and I think Kobold Press picked it up and put it into their Monster Vault. And I picked it up and I use it for my games. And that's what I have shown on the screen here. Real simple system. It's just take the total PC levels and multiply it by some multiplier. And the multiplier starts pretty low at levels 1 to 4, and then goes up pretty significantly at 5 and 11 and 17. And so if you have 5 players in your party, you know that a challenge rating 1, total challenge rating, so 1 CR1, 2 CRs half, 4 CRs a quarter, it's going to be kind of on the threshold of what's deadly. And you can have some of your encounters near there, some lower than there, maybe a few higher than there, and that'll give a good, challenge to the party. And if you go look at published adventures, when they get up to level 11 plus, they're nowhere near this level. And I ramp stuff I run up to this level, and the party can handle it. And it gives them at least a little bit of a challenge too. So don't be afraid to ramp it up. Start lower, but then build it up once you know what your players can handle. And the other thing I do, of course, we all know that the first monster manual, the 2014 monster manual, was way too low on damage output. So I use this multiplier here. And you'll note that this number after the decimal place is basically the proficiency bonus. So I just take all damage and multiply by that. And if you're running on a table, you can just add a die or a couple dice, depending on how far up the CR the monsters are. Now, would you want to keep doing that kind of a multiplier once you start using the 2024 monster manual? Not to start, probably, because if you look at the Imperium, for example, its damage went more than double what it used to be. So they caught on that they're way too low. They've ramped them up a lot, and so you got to watch out. If you're taking newer monsters, you might not put the full multiplier on the newer monsters. You might just run them as is. But if you got old monsters, they need some help for sure. And like I said, any system's this way. If it's too easy for your players, the best thing to do is ramp up the damage output of the monsters. What do you think about that, David? Any advice for what you would do for if the monsters are too easy for your players?
Yeah, I think ramping up the number and the damage output of monsters. I've done a little bit of the ramp up, and certainly I've played in a lot of your games where you've done more of it, and it works pretty well. I don't think, hopefully, that they won't need quite that much of a bonus now with the 2024 monsters.
Yeah. One thing you do note, though, and you've run into this a lot, is when the monsters put out all that damage in one hit, it really makes concentration spells hard.
Right. That's been my big beef with higher level scaling of monsters, and particularly upscaling the monster damage, is that the one part of the game where damage turns into a DC, those concentration checks, suddenly gets unattainable in a lot of cases. So you start seeing cases where, in the games I've played where it's been high, where you've been multiplying the damage, those concentration spells stop making sense as a good choice for spellcasters, because if you're going to get hit, you're not going to make that 30 DC based on the 60 points of damage that you just got whooped with.
Yeah.
And
so what you can do there as the DM is, instead of, for example, in the chart here, I have CR 9 through 12 or 13 and higher being 1.5 damage. Just if they have 2 attacks, give them 3 attacks. And then every attack will be a little bit lower damage, but they'll have the damage output.
That might be one thing. Better approach. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can kind of do that even when it gets down to 1.2. just give one monster in 5 2 attacks type of thing. And that'll keep it so you don't have to worry about changing anything in the stat block. You just start throwing in some extra attacks here and there. And that will also, you can like, say, oh, here's the lieutenant. He's doing 2 attacks instead of 1. That's another way you can do that. So then for the d20play RPG that I'm working on, I'm doing the same thing. Basically total PC levels times some multiplier. And I'm using, Shadow Dark to start with for like the how the monsters are defined with levels instead of CRs. With the CR system, a CR1 monster is like a level 4 creature in Shadow Dark. So you can have a lot lower numbers in D&D than you might have in Shadow Dark. So I have this table here that I'm working on, and I definitely say player skill and party composition can cause the threshold to vary greatly. So you want to vary that. Let's look at Shadow Dark real quick here. So we come to Shadow Dark. They have a monster design section up here. Somewhere they have how many you should have. How many? Okay, here they go. So they do it where, okay, so 1-to-1 to the party. If your party is 0 to 3rd level, every character should face a level 1 monster. So this is a very, very simple chart. Basically doing the same thing. The math works out nearly the same as what I ended up doing. And if you need just a little simple chart, this is a good one for that.
Yeah, if you're meaning to show it, I don't think you are.
Oh, let me share it. Yeah. Here's the Shadow Dark one. Now, Shadow Dark doesn't really have much for the big monsters to prevent them from being just swamped and killed with powerful spells. They do have, a lot of them have magic resistance where you have to roll a really high number to affect them with a spell. So that's one thing I might look at, is something similar to how they're doing with the new MCDM system, where some high-level monsters can take damage to not be affected by the spell. So that gives them a chance to avoid a hold monster spell or something like that.
There's not a lot of equalizers for action economy here either. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. Except the monsters ramp up on how many actions they get by level. So if we look at the damage over here, level 4 to 6 have 2 or 3 attacks. Level 7 to 9 have 3 or 4. Level 10, 4 or 5. And these aren't just attacks. It'll do multiple spells or multiple attacks. They're not spread across the round, but that's certainly something you can do as an alternative as a DM, is give them some of their attacks, right at the start of the round, and then the rest on their turn. That'd be a good way to spread out the action economy. So in this system, it's almost like every monster is a solo type monster. They all have multiple actions. Yeah, good observation, though. It didn't really jump out otherwise. But yeah, if you look at, I'm trying to think of what thing might have multiple spells in a round. I think the snake people do. Viperians, wizard, 1 dagger, or 2 spells. So yeah, he can cast 2 spells around. And I would probably do it like you're saying. If you wanted them to be the solo type thing, give 1 at the start of the round and 1 on their turn.
One of the challenges of coming up with some sort of encounter benchmark for how difficult an encounter is sort of the interaction between the number of creatures and the action economy that they have with the number of actions, say, a solo gets versus the number of actions a party gets. And if you want to have a solo creature match up pretty well with the party, they better get a fair number, a near number of actions. Yeah. And that's something where the D&D encounter benchmarks kind of stumble because 4th edition, as an example, really got it right by having an expectation that there would be 1 creature per character, and that if you had a different ratio, then you'd have specific solo or elite monsters that acted as 2 or 4 creatures, so it could balance that out. But there's nothing like that in 5th edition. And makes it a little more challenging to figure out how things are going to balance out. So in the 2024 DMG, you get an experience point budget for encounters, and that means that a single creature, since experience points sort of escalate non-linear, logarithmically, from as CRs increase, that means that possibly higher level creatures are sort of undervalued by the system, and certainly when they get their action economy deficit, they're really suffering.
Yeah, it's not a clean system to not do it like 4th edition did, where you count a solo like 4 of that level, or elite as 2 of that level. MCDM has solo turns where they're going to get 2 turns each round and 2 actions at each turn, so the solo gets 4 actions in a round. So kind of balanced against a party of 4. And their encounter design kind of building uses a similar system where it's point based. So hopefully the points of a solo are double the points of an equal level non-solo, right? I haven't looked to see if that's true or not. They have the added complication of how many victories they've had in the day, because you get more powerful as you go through the day. So I haven't looked into the system in detail. It'll be interesting to ask James what they did here.
Yeah, that's a big extra complexity, because later in the adventuring day, the parties can get quite a bit more powerful, and I think there's something in there to account for it.
Yeah. So if you took a system that was kind of like the best of both worlds, if we look at Shadow Dark here, or any system where it does a 1-to-1 type of thing, where the monster level matches a good challenge for the character of the same level, then that makes it really easy. Because then if I go to the monsters and designing it, and you got 1-to-1 monsters. Now Shadow Dark doesn't do where the monster level is 1-to-1 to the party level. But if you did a system where it was, then you could just do a solo count as 2 monsters or 4, and elite count as 2. Then that'd be a really simple system as a DM. And then you could look at the math and say, okay, if you double it, it's deadly. Or I mean, if it's 1-to-1 as designed, what kind of encounter is that? Is that deadly? Is that threatening? But I could probably do 4 of them in a day. That might be the simplest system, I think. So that's an interesting look at that. It'd be interesting to have Kelsey on again and ask her about what her thoughts were when she did this table here. Kelsey's going to do the Kickstarter, right, for her zines 4, 5, and 6 pretty soon for Shadow Dark. And I reached out and asked if I could run the adventures during the Kickstarter, and she said that, yeah. So hopefully I don't piss her off between now and then, and that still works out, because it'd be fun to run those. And then hopefully we can get her on and we can ask her that question. All right, what other questions we've got? Mauricio question: do you think that multipliers with decimals will make the system too crunchy? It could, and that's why I went with the table instead. In addition, the first part here kind of tells you what the table's based on, and here's the system. Now, Sly Flourish's original one, if I go look at the same table for a D&D one, so his original system was levels 1 through 4 is your total levels divided by 4. And then 5 through 10 was total levels divided by 2. So that's the same, fractions there. And then I forget what he did for higher levels than 10, but it was something similar where it built up a little bit. So you're right. Yeah, it's just math.
He wrote the section for Tales of the Valiant, and in there, his recommendation is 1/4 up to level 5. Level 5 and up, 1/2. But then he says for capable parties in tier 3, go with 0.75, and for capable parties at levels 17 through 20, go for 1-to-1.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is
that used to be a lot of CRs at the level 17.
That gets that gets some serious.
Yeah. I think that's why I toned it down a little bit, but I toned it down in combination with the fact that I multiply the damage. So if I wasn't multiplying damage, you might not tone it down. But I don't like putting a lot of hit points on the table, be that on one monster or lots of monsters, because it just becomes a slog. I like to get the damage going and make it challenging that way to avoid it being a slog.
Right. The one case where I will tend to put my thumb on the scale with the hit points is when there's a monster that has a big flashing kill me first sign on its forehead.
Yeah.
Because it's the mastermind, the leader, the spellcaster, something like that.
Yeah.
And those, if you want them to stay around to do whatever it is that makes them exciting, they often need more hit points than the system gives them.
Yeah, I remember the 5th edition mage was such a paper tiger. If you were facing a mage, and they have like Cone of Cold and fireballs and everything, so you got to kill them fast. But you could kill them fast because they had like 40 hit points. So,
or the Lich it's an Archmage with 99 hit points.
Yep. I think they said in the live stream those have both gone up a lot. So we'll see.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, either you have to do what you're saying or you have to be kind of tricky in how you use them, right? Which may be more tricky than they could be in reality against a party. They're behind a wall of force. They're, don't come in until the round 2.
Always give your leaders or masterminds or arch foes a warm-up act to start the fight before they take the stage. That makes it much more interesting.
Yeah.
Because those first blasts from everybody will be soaked up by the warm-up act, and it won't be a sudden death for the star once the paladin closes the distance and starts unloading every smite available.
Yeah, Tiger Epicate agrees. Multi-phase encounter is good to keep the party from steamrolling things. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's about all I had. Any last words, David?
Well, let me just say, best part of the preview of the Monster Manual 2, I'm really excited about the different level variants of monsters. We were talking about the vampire as an example, but it seems like they're going to do that for other types. Tougher high-level monsters. We were talking about that with the Imperium, with the extra damage. And I already mentioned the gender-swapped hags, so that'll be trickier for players to sniff out. So,
Greg has one comment. All this math is making narrative-style games without hit points enticing, LOL. And I agree, even though I don't like that type of game. And the way I look at it is we have the systems like D&D where you have a ton going on and you're just going to be okay in the end because you're going to win. And we have games like Shadow Dark that have stat blocks that are tiny, but you feel like you're in danger all the time. And I'm getting more and more drawn to these latter type of games, which are actually the earlier type of games that don't have the guardrails, don't protect you. And so there's not a lot of math. It's real simple, but you feel more danger.
The old school approach to encounter design is don't worry about it. If you pit a deadly encounter against your players, it is a test of skill for them to determine that they should be avoiding that encounter.
Exactly.
Sometimes that means you've got to assume that the player characters know more as experienced adventurers than the players, and you can just say your take on what you're seeing ahead of you is that this is too dangerous for you to battle, and that's okay. I mean, that's probably not the way Gary would have done it, but
I didn't go as hard in the final version of this as I do when I was first writing it, but I said here, vary the difficulty of monster encounters to challenge your players. And I kind of had words to the effect of they need to learn when to run away.
And you went hard on those variety of difficulties,
Yes.
starting at threatening, escalating to deadly,
It's very
and
deadly.
then hitting very deadly. Um,
Yeah.
wow.
I mean, I'm not a killer DM, but I do like to challenge the players.
Yes. Some
So
DMs like an occasional upbeat where, they just have an easy match, or they decide to take a different approach to the bandits that are clearly overmatched and think that they're going to take out a high level bunch of characters.
yeah.
Um,
Another thing I said in the bottom of this one here is successful PCs will strive to turn the odds in their favor through any means possible and don't thwart them on that. If they come up with a genius plan to kill the dragon, that's what they should be doing, right? And so let them do that kind of stuff. That's part of the game. That's it for me.
well put.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. Next week we're going to have Ghostfire Games on. Ghostfire Games is starting a new organized play system. They like previewed it at Gen Con. They're going to do it at Winter Fantasy, which is coming up in a month, that I'm going to be at. David's going to be at, and we're going to try it out there. We're going to have hopefully Sean, hopefully Joe, and hopefully Ben, all from Ghostfire Games, on next week. So leave questions in the Discord and join us then. Thanks, everyone.